Generally, a spring is fairly easy to create in Solidworks, but one question that comes up quite frequently is how to create a automotive spring like this that tapers off at the end and has flat spots on both sides. So we'll be using a variable helix and a swept feature to create this part. First, we want to create a new document, a new part. Then we're going to create a sketch on the top plane. I'll go ahead and draw in a circle at the origin and give it a dimension of 3 inches. The helix feature in Solidworks is going to use this circle as a reference. One thing to keep in mind when setting this diameter is where you're going to place the profile. In this case, we're placing our profile at the center of this line, which means that it's actually going to be slightly wider than 3 inches. So you just want to keep that in mind when creating your springs. Next, we'll come into the Features tab, go into Curves, and choose Helix Spiral. By default, this is set to constant pitch. In this case, we're going to use the variable pitch option. And you want to go ahead and just key in the following values. The first pitch is going to be 0.1, and then the next pitch is 1 into 1 revolution. The next pitch is 1.2 up to 6 revolutions. The next is 1 inch pitch and up to the 7th revolution. And lastly, set this at 0.1 up to the 8th revolution. And this will make us a symmetrical spring. We also have the option of modifying the diameter, but we'll go ahead and leave that as we want a constant diameter in this case. You also want to note that when you're creating a spring like this, you'll probably have to play around with these values. I had to play around with a few values for the pitch and the revolutions to get it just right. So we'll go ahead and create that helix with that start angle of 0 degrees. And now we want to create the profile for the sweep. And we'll do that on the right plane. I'll go ahead and sketch in a circle here. And now we want to create a pierce relation with the helix. You want to make sure that you're not selecting the point at the end of the helix though, because when you do that and select the center point there, you'll notice that no add relation box comes up. When you click the helix and the point, that add relation box comes up and we have the choice to pierce, which we'll choose. Keep that in mind when working with curves, that you won't be able to select that endpoint to add relations, that you'll actually have to select the entire helix. Also, if we were to select a different loop of the helix, it would move the circle down and pierce at that loop instead. Lastly here, I just want to add a dimension to the circle. We'll set that at 1/2 inch, and then we'll exit the sketch. Now I want to use the swept boss base, and I'll choose the circle as the profile and the helix as the path, and click OK. Next, before I create the cuts on both sides, we want a reference to create a mirror plane. In this case, rather than having to look back into the height of the helix and trying to figure out where that plane should go, we're going to go ahead and click on the outside face of the helix, go to Reference Geometry, and choose Point. And by default, that's going to place a point at the center of that face. So it's going to be easy to create a mirror plane. So go ahead and create a sketch on the top plane. And I'll draw in a circle at the top. Doesn't matter how large, just needs to be larger than the helix itself. I'll go ahead and exit the sketch and create an extruded cut. And then we just want to flip the direction here. And I'm going to right click and choose through all and exit the feature. Lastly, we want to mirror this over to the other side. So I'll go ahead and choose the top plane, hold down Control on the keyboard here, click on the corner and drag that down. That'll create a parallel plane, and if we select that center point, it'll place it at the point and we have our mirror plane. Lastly here, we'll choose the mirror tool, choose that plane 1 as the mirror plane, and we'll choose that cut extrude as the feature to mirror. Now I'm just going to go ahead and hide out the point and the plane, and we'll apply an appearance to our coil spring here. We'll go into the Appearance tab, come into the Appearances here. In this case, we'll choose the Painted folder, and then the Car folder. And we'll go ahead and drag gloss red into the workspace here. And that'll apply to the entire part. So there we have our finished coil spring.